March 25th, 1987. 4 days after his son Dean Paul Martin died in that horrific plane crash in the San Bernardino Mountains, Dean Martin sits alone in his son's apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a life cut tragically short. As Dean packs away his son's belongings with trembling hands, he discovers something hidden behind a framed photo on the nightstand. A sealed envelope marked "For Dad A, open only if something happens to me." Inside, Dean finds a letter written in his son's handwriting, dated just 2 weeks before the crash. The contents are so shocking that Dean Martin drops the letter and staggers backward in horror. The letter reveals that Captain Dean Paul Martin's death was not an accident. It was murder, and the people responsible had been watching the Martin family for decades, waiting for the perfect moment to send a message to Dean Martin himself. A message that would silence the king of cool forever. What Dean's son had discovered about his father's past was so dangerous that it cost him his life. And what Dean learned from that letter would destroy his will to live. The letter contained evidence that would rewrite everything America knew about Dean Martin's career. The story begins not with the plane crash, but 3 months earlier, in December 1986, when Captain Dean Paul Martin made a discovery that would ultimately cost him his life. Dean Paul, 35 years old, and a respected F-4 Phantom pilot with the California Air National Guard, had always known his father was more than just an entertainer. Growing up around Frank Sinatra, the Rat Pack, and the Las Vegas scene of the 1960s, he had witnessed conversations that stopped when children entered the room, seen men in expensive suits who weren't in show business, and noticed the way certain people treated his father with a combination of respect and fear. But it wasn't until December 15th, 1986, that Dean Paul learned the full truth about his father's double life. What Captain Martin discovered in a classified military briefing would expose his father as one of the CIA's most valuable assets. It started during a routine security briefing at March Air Force Base. As a captain with high security clearance, Dean Paul was being briefed on potential security threats to military personnel. The briefing included a section on entertainment industry intelligence assets, performers who had been recruited by various government agencies to gather information during their travels. When Dean Paul saw his father's name on the classified list, he assumed it was a mistake. Dean Martin was listed as Asset Romeo 7, recruited in 1952, with the operational classification of long-term deep cover cultural intelligence operative. The file indicated that Dean Martin had been providing intelligence to the CIA for over 30 years, using his entertainment career as cover to monitor organized crime activities, report on foreign nationals in the entertainment industry, and facilitate various covert operations through his connections in Las Vegas, Hollywood, and international entertainment venues. Dean Paul was stunned. His father, the man he knew as a fun-loving entertainer who just wanted to sing and play golf, had been a government spy his entire career. But the most shocking revelation was still to come. Dean Paul used his military clearance to access more detailed files about his father's operations. What he found made him question everything he thought he knew about Dean Martin's career. According to the classified documents, Dean Martin hadn't just been reporting on organized crime. He had been actively participating in CIA operations to control and manipulate organized crime for government purposes. The famous Rat Pack performances in Las Vegas weren't just entertainment. They were cover for meetings between CIA operatives and mob bosses who were being used as assets in various international operations. Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., and the other Rat Pack members were also listed as intelligence assets. But Dean Martin was different. He was listed as the primary control agent responsible for managing the other entertainers and ensuring their cooperation with CIA directives. The documents revealed that Dean Martin had been involved in everything from money laundering operations that funded covert CIA activities to assassination plots against foreign leaders who threatened American interests in the entertainment industry. But the file that truly horrified Dean Paul was labeled Operation Nightingale, Termination Protocols. Dean Paul Martin had just learned that his father was marked for elimination. Operation Nightingale was a CIA protocol for retiring long-term assets who had become liabilities. The file indicated that Dean Martin's usefulness as an intelligence asset was coming to an end, and that his extensive knowledge of CIA operations made him a security risk. The plan was elegant in its brutality. Rather than directly eliminating Dean Martin, which would attract too much attention, the CIA would target his family members to psychologically destroy him. A grieving, broken Dean Martin would be unlikely to reveal government secrets, and his eventual death from natural causes would seem like the result of overwhelming grief. Dean Paul's name was specifically mentioned in the termination protocol. As Dean Martin's eldest son and a military officer with security clearance, Dean Paul was considered the most logical target. His death would be arranged to look like an accident, and his father's subsequent psychological collapse would ensure his silence. The plan was already in motion. Dean Paul's flight schedules had been manipulated to increase his exposure to dangerous weather conditions. Equipment maintenance on his aircraft had been subtly sabotaged, and weather modification technology was being deployed to create the kind of severe storm conditions that would make a crash seem like an inevitable accident. Captain Martin realized he was living on borrowed time. On February 28, 1987, Dean Paul wrote the letter that his father would discover 4 weeks after his death. In it, he detailed everything he had learned about his father's CIA involvement and the plot to eliminate the Martin family. The letter read, in part, "Dad, if you're reading this, it means they succeeded in killing me. I know about Operation Nightingale. I know about your 35 years as CIA asset Romeo 7. I know about the Rat Pack operations, the mob connections, and the government contracts that built your career. More importantly, I know they're planning to kill me to destroy you psychologically. My death is supposed to look like an accident, but it's murder. They've been sabotaging my aircraft and manipulating my flight assignments for months. I've tried to find a way to stop this, but they control everything. The military, the weather, even the investigation that will follow my death. The only thing I can do is make sure you know the truth. Dad, I need you to understand that whatever happens to me is not your fault. You did what you had to do to survive in a world that gave you no choice. But I also need you to know that if you try to expose what they did to me, they'll kill you too. The evidence of their operations is hidden in Safety Deposit Box 147 at Security Pacific Bank in Beverly Hills. The key is taped under the drawer in my desk. Use it to protect yourself, not to seek revenge. They're too powerful to fight. But the most chilling part of the letter was Dean Paul's description of how his murder would be carried out. Dean Paul had discovered that the CIA had developed weather modification technology specifically for eliminating targets in aircraft. Using a combination of atmospheric manipulation and targeted electromagnetic interference, they could create localized storms that would appear completely natural while making aircraft crashes virtually inevitable. Dad, they're going to create a freak snowstorm on the day they kill me. It will look like the worst possible weather conditions, but it's actually a controlled environment designed to make my crash seem like a tragic accident. The storm will be so severe that search and rescue operations will be delayed, ensuring that any evidence of sabotage is destroyed or buried. The official investigation will conclude that pilot error or mechanical failure caused the crash. But the truth is that they will have guided my aircraft into the mountain using technology that leaves no trace. I've seen the operational timeline. They're planning to do this in March 1987 during a routine training mission. I'm writing this letter on the last day of February because I know I probably won't live to see April. Dean Paul's letter also contained a warning about his father's survival. Dad, after they kill me, you're going to want to die too. That's part of their plan. They're counting on your grief to silence you permanently, but I need you to stay alive long enough to protect the rest of our family. They won't stop with me. If you don't play your part as the grieving father who retreats from public life, they'll target Gail, Deanna, Richie, and Gina. They'll make it look like accidents or natural causes, but they'll keep killing our family until you're completely isolated and broken. The only way to protect everyone is to become the man they want you to be, full a shell of your former self, too devastated to speak, too broken to fight. It's a horrible choice, but it's the only way to keep the people we love alive. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry they used you. I'm sorry they're using me to hurt you. And I'm sorry that the only way to save our family is to let them destroy your soul. The letter contained one final devastating revelation. Dean Paul had discovered that his death was just the beginning of a larger operation to eliminate all the surviving members of the original CIA entertainment program. Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., and the other Rat Pack members were all marked for termination through various means: staged accidents, induced heart attacks, and psychological manipulation designed to cause suicide. Dad, they're planning to clean house. Everyone who knows about the entertainment industry's intelligence operations is going to die over the next decade. They'll space the deaths out to avoid suspicion, and each one will look completely natural or accidental. You're not the only target. You're just the first. They're using my death to set a precedent for how they'll eliminate the others. Watch what happens to Frank, Sammy, and Joey in the coming years. When they die, remember that it wasn't old age or natural causes. It was Operation Nightingale. When Dean Martin finished reading his son's letter, he realized the full scope of the trap. Dean Martin sat in his son's apartment, holding the letter with trembling hands as the truth of his situation became clear. His son had been murdered to silence him, but speaking out would only result in more murders. Staying silent meant living with the knowledge that he was responsible for his son's death. But fighting back meant watching the rest of his family die. It was the perfect psychological trap. The CIA had turned Dean's love for his family into a weapon against him. They had made him an accomplice in his own son's murder by making resistance impossible. Dean Martin made the only choice he could make. He decided to play the role they had written for him. Myris, the grief-stricken father who withdrew from public life and slowly died of a broken heart. It was the performance of his lifetime, and it would last for the remaining 8 years of his life. But Dean Martin also made one other decision. He would hide his son's letter where no one would think to look, and he would leave clues for someone to find it after his death. If he couldn't expose the truth while he lived, maybe someone else could expose it after he died. The letter that destroyed Dean Martin would not be discovered again for over 20 years. In 2019, during the renovation of Dean Martin's Beverly Hills home, construction workers found a hidden compartment behind a false wall in Dean's study. Inside was Dean Paul's original letter, along with additional evidence that Dean had gathered over the 8 years following his son's death. Dean had spent his final years quietly documenting every suspicious death among his former colleagues, every accident that befell people connected to the entertainment industry intelligence operations, and every piece of evidence he could gather about Operation Nightingale. When the FBI was finally presented with this evidence in 2020, they reopened investigations into dozens of celebrity deaths from the 1980s and 1990s. What they found confirmed Dean Paul Martin's worst fears. Operation Nightingale had been real, and it had been responsible for the deaths of numerous entertainment industry figures who had outlived their usefulness as intelligence assets. The letter that revealed a father's greatest nightmare. Dean Paul Martin's letter to his father revealed the truth about one of the most successful intelligence operations in American history. For decades, the CIA had used entertainment industry figures as unwitting assets, gathering information and facilitating covert operations through the glamorous world of Hollywood and Las Vegas. But when those assets became liabilities, the agency had no qualms about eliminating them and their families. Dean Paul Martin's murder was just one example of how the intelligence community protected its secrets by destroying the people who had helped keep them. Dean Martin spent the last 8 years of his life carrying the unbearable knowledge that his career had been built on lies, that his son had been murdered because of his cooperation with those lies, and that speaking the truth would only result in more deaths. The letter his son left him was both a gift and a curse. It explained the truth about Dean Paul's death, but it also made clear that there was nothing Dean could do about it without sacrificing the rest of his family. In the end, Dean Martin died as he had lived for his final 8 years, as a prisoner of secrets that were too dangerous to reveal and too painful to bear. The letter from his son had given him the truth, but truth without the power to act on it is just another form of torture. The most chilling aspect of Dean Paul Martin's letter was its accuracy. Every prediction he made about his own death and his father's subsequent psychological destruction came true, exactly as he had foreseen. He had understood the machine that was about to kill him better than the people operating it, and that understanding had made his murder even more tragic. Dean Martin kept his son's secret until the day he died, protecting his family by sacrificing his own peace of mind. It was the ultimate expression of love, on a father accepting eternal torment to keep his children safe.